this is what people thought cannabis should be. And I think we're about to embark upon delivering some of those things that everyone was hoping for.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Obie Strickler. Obie, thanks for taking time. How you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. You guys appreciate having me on and looking forward to it.
Excited to dive in and talk about Grown Rogue. Kellen, how are you doing?
Doing really well. Really excited to talk to Obie. Really excited to dive into kind of a really powerful West Coast company coming east. So super excited. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about craft cannabis, and I think profitability should be tied into all that every single time. And I think today we're really going to dive into some of the nuts and bolts that makes Obie and his team pretty special. And before we were talking, Obie, we were talking about some of the battle-tested elements, and I'm excited to kind of get your take on some of those experiences so that anyone listening can kind of learn through some of the ups and downs that goes on. So before we start, can you give a little background about yourself and some of the early days at Grown Rogue?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Oregon. I've been here my whole life. Met my wife here. We've got kids. We've always had a strong passion for cannabis. My professional education is in geology. And so, we kind of had a dual path early on, started in the early 2000s when the medical marijuana kind of, in Oregon started. And so we kind of always had this kind of side hustle, medical marijuana kind of caregiver business that we were running. But then I spent a bunch of kind of my professional career, call it, before we started Grown Rogue officially, kind of running big natural resource projects. We built a really nice kind of cultivation business. It was always around, again, freedom of choice, holistic healing. Obviously people use it for recreation, but we saw a lot of firsthand kind of, the health and medical benefits that cannabis could provide in terms of pain, sleep. And again, we're big on freedom of choice and people's right to choose around, what they want to do. And then everything in moderation, right? You can abuse anything, cannabis being one of them, but moderation is also critical. Kind of dual path this up for, 10 years or so, mostly a focus on outdoor in the cannabis business. Got into a bunch of mining work on the geology side, did a tech company for a little bit. And then, come into 14, 15, we started seeing really the perception and the transitionary change where cannabis was becoming less egregious and more acceptable. Canada was going, through their kind of legalization process. In the mining sector, I had, a fair amount of experience with public companies, right? We were on junior exchanges. We had assets, in the US and internationally. And so it was like, hey, if we're going to do this, we're passionate about it. I was traveling a bunch, now's the time. And so we started Grown Rogue, I think officially in 16, early 17. Took it public in 18, made a ton of mistakes, right? We were all over the place. We were listening to, kind of what people were telling us we should do, right? Expand quickly, raise a bunch of cash, get into all the markets you can, be vertical. And that was just kind of a disaster for us. It wasn't where our passion laid. We were operating in Oregon, which was one of the first states to go through a pretty aggressive compressionary cycle. And so, it was oversupplied. Prices were going down. I was telling everyone at that point, even wait till Canada when they're turning on, millions and millions of square feet of greenhouse in areas you don't want to grow in. Just wait. And subsequently that's come true. And 2019, 20, we were we're running out of money. We're not excited about what we're doing. We're all spread out. And I reorganized the entire business to focus on cultivation. We sold our California asset. We got out of our distribution. We stopped trying to chase, acquisitions all over the country. We were traveling all the time looking for stuff. And I said, let's do what we're passionate about. Let's focus on profitability, discipline, systems, process. And that became essentially the foundation for what Grown Rogue is today, which is high quality, low cost, extremely efficient cannabis cultivator. We spent probably 2 years really defining that, really established our cost control, our disciplines, our planning, got Oregon and Michigan into a very profitable and kind of, more importantly, a product that customers really look for, and said, great, if we were a private company, I might have been like, hey, now it's time to take a break, collect the profits. But frankly, that's not my personality. I want to build the first nationally recognized craft cannabis company in the US. And we're also public. We had taken people's money. They expected growth. And so we said, the next thing to prove after we've established the foundation is, can we scale? And that's what we've set off kind of starting in, late 22, early 23 with our partnership with Goodness. That was kind of a test to see, can our team take on more responsibility? Because it's all about your team. And then we announced the New Jersey asset, which we're just about to turn on. Like, we're through the final kind of steps of construction for phase one. We subsequently announced an Illinois opportunity that we're in the design and engineering on. And our goal now is to run and kind of roll out 1 to 2 states a year within our business model, which is 1,000, 1,200 pounds a month, and just start stepping these things out. We build them efficiently. They're sub $10 million to turn these things on. So we're very efficient with our CapEx spend. And we think that's the right size in a market to get the right scarcity for the customer, maintain quality, enough scale to have the cost efficiencies we need to achieve. And, we kind of think we've got a little moat. As much as people say cultivation is a commodity, very few people can do what we do. And we think there's actually a pretty protectable moat for what we're doing because it's hard to replicate. So that's the 10,000 foot view of where we came from and where we're at today.
I want to stay with the decision to kind of sell up those assets and kind of double down on cultivation. That had to have been a very defining moment internally, because I'm sure there were some outside voices that maybe had an opinion, hey, stay the path, just stay forward. And there might be some people internally as well who were like, hey, Obie, like, these are the right moves. We just got to stick to it. So take us through that conversation internally. Was there difficulties internally? Did you always know in your heart this was or did you have any doubt saying, hey, like, I don't know if now is the right time? Take us through that complicated and really difficult decision that really set you on the right path.
I'll talk about how easy it was, but the reality was a super challenging time in Grown Rogue's kind of progression. So the first thing we did is anyone that didn't agree with that approach, we fired and got rid of. We cleaned house, and we said people that were focused on capital markets and all these things that were distractions, we said, you're no longer a part of the organization. And that was difficult, right? These were people that really helped us through the first few years, but you have migration in terms of your team as your business adjusts, and they need to adjust with the business. And so, simply those people left, and the people that stayed were the ones that believed in kind of the strategy and the vision. The next thing we did, which everyone hated, and I got yelled at all the time, was we ignored all the capital market noise. We said to our investors, like, leave us alone. We're not doing any more IR, no more marketing. We're only focusing on building a business that is sustainable. And it's going to take a couple of years. Give us time. And if you don't have time, sell your stock. Like, we took a ton of pressure. Most people believed in that and they held, and they've been very well rewarded. But those are the two things we did. And it was, trust me, I took a lot of, not sleepless nights. I sleep well, but a lot of people are not happy with that decision. Fast forward a few years later, trust me, they're all happy now. And so it worked out pretty well for myself personally, my wife. We're still the largest shareholders, and it's worked out for our team. And, we've got a really, really good culture. Those are the two big things. It was not easy, but it was definitely necessary.
Especially when you look at California, right? Everyone's like, there's 38 million people that live there. It's the biggest market. Why would you not want to be there? Just kind of grind it out. But that grinding it out is crazy expensive. It burns people out. And so did you have a bunch of support from your board when you're like, hey, these are the reasons that we're going to kind of trim the fat and kind of go back to our North Star? And like, was that, they were like, yeah, you have our support? Was there kind of like a journey through explaining yourself and how you came to that rationale?
The board's been very supportive. And so we had their support. There was obviously dialogue and questions around, philosophy and strategy. But hindsight's always easy to look at it. But there's a ton of companies that didn't make the hard choices we made. And, we used to track a lot of the West Coast pubcos. Guess what? They're all gone. Every single one of them is pretty much gone. Dem's gone. Halo's gone. Chalice is gone. Lowell's gone. Glass House was kind of new. They're still here. But these pubcos that did that, like, they kept with that just growth at all costs. No discipline, no financial management, and no real business plan. How many companies do you look at? You're like, who are you? What do you do? And that's the thing about Grown Rogue. We're like, we know exactly who we are, exactly what we're going to do. And either you like that and you agree with it, or you don't. And if you do, great. If you don't, there's 1,000 companies to go spend time kind of getting involved with. And the board bought into that, but obviously there was discussions and, it was not easy. Think about it, as an entrepreneur, you're having to retrench and retract. Like, that's hard. Like, we're passionate. We all have egos. We're all aggressive. We all want to grow. We all want to be the biggest. And so that was a tough step in my kind of professional development. But again, it was 100% the right decision.
Yeah, and I think seeing the building of the competitive advantage that your team kind of has acquired so early on in the process, when so many of the peers out there, exactly like you said, Obi, they do many things, right? Like they do nothing amazing, but they do many things. So let's stay with kind of ripping up the states and figuring out efficiency and profitability standpoint. You decided to let go of the assets. Now you're doubling down on cultivation. You want to understand from a profitability standpoint where all the holes are in your process. Is that like a 360 view? Did you have like a team to kind of go through it and figure out like, hey, like here's a leaky faucet here, here's one here. Take us through that process of understanding exactly like where your strengths and weaknesses were internally and then how you kind of fortified the moat.
Yeah, we had the right kind of pieces. I think when we refocused the business, we got a lot of alignment on our team around being a cultivator only. It simplified it. But I mean, it was a grind. I mean, I laugh. I mean, there was a period there where I was so far down inside of the business and the day-to-day operations. Like I would literally go through like line by line, like inventory and how do we manage this and how do we get it sold? Because inventories, I mean, if you stack it, you're not monetizing it. And you can report good EBITDA still, but if your inventory is growing, like your cash, because we're a cash company, like I focus on cash. And so we just went deep, myself personally. Like I was not a CEO at that point. Like I didn't care about expansion. I didn't care about growth. It was about how do I build a business that's no longer dependent upon outside influences? And that's what we have today. And I'll tell you what, when we achieve that, you can't fathom how rewarding that is to be like, you know what, we are self-sufficient. And we may not be the biggest, we may not grow as fast, but guess what? We are not dependent upon outside cash, outside influences. Like we have a business that functions and operates. And it's funny, like I just saw this morning, like the Viridian credit tracker, like we've been the number 2 credit rating for like years. This tiny little, and we're not so tiny anymore. Like we're starting to grow and people are starting to recognize, but that's something that's really dear to my heart is just, you know, we have tons of discipline. And that's been an important part of our kind of mantra for, you know, ever since we kind of redefined who we wanted to be. And with that comes passion, right? Like I'm not even a huge consumer anymore, but we all love weed. We love flower. We love looking at it. We love seeing it. We like watching it grow. We like going through our genetic planning. We like seeing the new stuff that comes through. Like our team is fully aligned towards that. And as I work with a lot of other companies, I don't see that you can't fake passion from the top. And you have a lot of kind of really good teams that don't get the support. And I think one of the things that made Grown Rogue unique is our operation teams, like our cultivators and our fertigators and post-harvest. They know, one, my commitment and, you know, Sarah, my wife's commitment, like, and then just the support we have for the product. And we prioritize quality over almost anything. And so there's just a lot of respect from the legacy side of our industry. And that's really what Grown Rogue has been great at, is professionalizing a very robust legacy market, empowering these growers who are like, you know, I could never get an interview with a big MSO because I don't have a college degree. And we're like, I don't care if you have a college degree. You're a savage stud in the grow room. Like, that's what I need. I need great growing results. And they feel that. And you can't fake that piece of it. And so I think we have a lot of authenticity as it relates to, you know, the legacy and the history of this industry, while simultaneously getting our team to align that this is a business. We do have to make hard decisions. We do need to worry about cash. It's just been a really, really good balance.
Do you think that getting so deep into the weeds in terms of day-to-day operations really helped kind of refocus the culture and all of those like items you just touched on?
100%. I mean, culture is another thing that's a great buzzword, and everyone talks about how they prioritize culture. But I mean, again, we talked about it earlier, like, I know it's blurred, but my office is in a grow facility. Like, my team sees me every day. Like, they see the presence. I talk about presence all the time. And it's easy to talk about all like the, you know, oh, we've got to do like events and, you know, give them a pizza party. But you know what people want to see? They want to look through a window. They want to walk by an office and go, God, there's Obie, the leader of this company, who's working his ass off. That motivates them more than like anything else I could probably do. And so that focus and that commitment 100% has driven just the global commitment our company has to be excellent. And that transcends across all the way from our, you know, leadership team down to the techs that work in the grow rooms, just that pride and that passion. They want to bring the best. And we are. I mean, we're really good. And that's rewarding, right? They see the excitement, they see the quality, they understand the market share we get. And that gets people excited when they're like, holy crap, I'm a part of building something that is truly, it's very well received. It's a great product. They like smoking it. We have a great sample program. We built an awesome business.
And I think it just demonstrates like first off, how challenging the cannabis industry is. And for you to have like your hands in the dirt and fighting every single day, people down the chain respect that. And then I think it likely translates through to the projects and doing things the right way. Because I think in an industry that's moving as fast as ours, it's easy to say, hey, like we could just quickly skip this step. Obie's not going to know. We could just keep it moving and finish on time. But it seems like your team understands the intricate details and the importance of efficiency and expertise. You think those small details are underappreciated, let's say, by the outside industry for most of the industry when recognizing like how critical the operational expertise is for the success, not only short term, but for the long term of companies?
Yes. I don't think most folks really appreciated that this is a manufacturing industry. And again, I think, and this will come off a little bit politically incorrect, but I really don't care anymore, is you had a ton of very smart Harvard, like just educated attorneys, MBA, like just these super smart folks that looked at the illegal cannabis sector and saw these kind of dumb hippies, right? And we're like, wait a second, look how much money this person's making. They didn't go to college. They don't seem all that sophisticated. And they took a spreadsheet and they're like, so they have 10 lights, they do 12 pounds. I'm going to do 10 million lights and look at the way this scales. That's not how business works. It's just not. It's not software. It doesn't scale like that. And they forgot that it doesn't go from A to Z. Like there's steps in the process. And I think we got away from that a little bit when I stopped to kind of pay tribute to just the work that has to get done. But when we recentered around, like I tell them, like, my accounting and finance team, like you guys all work for the grow team. Like your only reason you're here is because they produce stuff that you have to like account for and figure out the cost. Like, don't think you're all high and mighty. Like, and I remind them, like, I am more, I prioritize the operational side much more than I do the business side. And most companies, I don't think, look at that. They want like the sophistication that comes with, just the perception of the way that is. But we are cultivation, operationally focused business, and our whole team gets that. And I mean, that's what we do. We make products.
Why do you think it doesn't scale as easy as like just the Excel sheet example, which is a beautiful example? Why doesn't it work as easy as that?
Well, we're starting to prove maybe it does. Once you have the right system in place, right? Like as we start turning on these assets, I think it's because we're manufacturing and like there's an artistry to what we do in the cultivation side. Like you can scale distillate pretty easily, right? Think about like a Select or something like that. Like that's a product that's pretty easy to scale. It's just a chemical it's a molecule of THC. But when you take the artistry that goes around high quality flower production, which is the niche what we're focused on, right? It takes years of experience. Like you can't just work in a company for 5 years and think you've established that. Like I laugh with my national director of cultivation, who's been in this industry for a long time. He's like, you know why I'm so good at, and he's not like ego, but he's like, the reason he's so good is because when he was growing, like that was his livelihood. If he screwed something up and the crop didn't work, it wasn't like he's like, oh damn, I guess I'll still get my paycheck. It's like he might not eat or pay his rent. And so his ability to prioritize and make the right decisions, and then to feel the intensity of delivery, it's hard to replicate that. And so it's just taken time. And then I also think there's a lack of understanding of the consumer, of what they really want. And you think about, we talked briefly before we started the recording, like Jersey's got crazy pricing for terrible weed, right? When you can go into a market and put anything on a shelf and charge that price with that margin, you actually don't know anything. You don't know any different. We are in Oregon, where people have been smoking weed for a long time. Trust me, there's product here that you could not sell. That doesn't happen in these early markets. Like you could probably put anything on the shelf in New Jersey and it'll sell. Like there's stuff that gets grown in Oregon that literally people are like, no, thank you. You probably have to give it away. And so that just creates a different level of knowledge base. And it sets the right habits. We talk about habits a lot. Like our habits are super strong. And once you establish that habit where they're just very difficult to break. And how do you fix it?
Let's talk about payback periods. I think that's one of the aspects that I really appreciate about your company is talking about how clear those elements are. And I think some of the markets we're talking about, New Jersey and Illinois. So take us through when you're combining your expertise and efficiency standpoint, how you kind of come to those payback periods.
Yeah, it'll depend upon markets for sure based on the pricing. But, a couple of really good examples that are specific to Grown Rogue is we got much more kind of focused on our cultivation. Like we've spent, I think at this point, $5 million total in Michigan. Right. We were like at 4 kind of to get the size, and we've been doing some upgrades because we built there kind of, I wouldn't say cheaply, but we had some improvements we need to make, a little bit of HVAC, adding a few things. But I think Michigan will do $6 million of EBITDA this year. Right. So you think about $5 million of CapEx and we're already at 6. We did 4 there last year. Like we measure paybacks in these markets in like definitely less than 2 years, probably less than a year. You look at a market like Jersey and and another thing that we don't talk about enough, like operationally, you can see in our financial reporting, the EBITDA margins, like our cost per pound of production is really, really good. Like we've hit below 6 adjusted EBITDA. That's like perfection. It's almost impossible to maintain that in perpetuity. And so we're kind of targeting like a sub 7. We think we'll get to the 6s. We're trying to figure out how to extend the timelines where we exist in kind of that peak performance. Maybe it's sustainable at some point, but it's really difficult. But when you talk about capital invested, most projects we look at, and we're learning more about why these are so expensive, $300 a foot is kind of the standard. And I've been trying to figure out why, because we built Michigan at 100. Granted, we had a little bit of improvement, but we have 50,000 square feet there operating, and we're at $5 million. So that's $100 a foot. We're going to build Jersey because it's a brand new build, a little bit more sophisticated, a little better HVAC. We use panels instead of drywall. We did a little bit more fancy fertigation system. We'll probably be like 160 or 170. So we're still $100 a foot cheaper. So that makes our payback period just shorter because we're just not spending as much cash. So Jersey, it's just called a 50,000 square foot building. We'll be sub 10 to build that whole thing, probably like 8. 1,000 pounds a month. We think we'll be at 12, but just use 1,000 for easy numbers. $3,000 pounds. That's 1,000 a month. 3,000. That's a $36 million top line business. We're growing at 700. Assume we're at 1,000, just because we're not as efficient right out the gate. That's $2,000 a pound of profit. We're paying that back in less than a year, 6 months. The economics are insane for us. And I think that's why you're seeing the performance in our stock is because we've proven a model, and they look at this and they go, if Grown Rogue can execute and those pricing stay, which we don't expect to last forever, but New Jersey's looking pretty strong. The economics are ridiculous. Like this is what people thought cannabis should be. And I think we're about to embark upon delivering some of those things that everyone was hoping for.
But how much was that cost savings per building attributed to kind of going back to focusing on the operational efficiencies, right? Because there's got to be a lot of like accessories that a lot of these other organizations include because they're like, hey, we might need this if this happens, right? So how much can you attribute that significant cost decrease to kind of those, that knowledge base?
I would say it's a great question. It's one of the things I've wanted to answer over the last year, and we've been getting much closer as we're doing these more sophisticated builds and talking to more contractors, spending time with other companies in terms of what they're spending. I think it's 2 things. One, we don't over-engineer anything. We do a lot of internal work, where we're not just paying a contractor to go get a bench design for us or something. And so we see maybe half of our savings is around just, we save $2 here a foot, $3 here. So it's just little stuff just because we grind on it. Because, one of the things I learned very early in my career was it's really easy to spend someone else's money. A bunch of this money's ours, right? And so I look at every dollar I have like it's my own dollar. And if I don't need to spend it, I won't. So we save money there. And then the other thing I think is because we are responsible and we do we kind of own our process, we're willing to take a more aggressive approach. We're not a consultant, and a lot of these companies just hire a consultant. I was a consultant for years in the mining industry. Like you have a professional kind of responsibility to deliver something you know is going to work, which means you're going to over-engineer it to ensure it's perfect. Granted, a lot of them aren't perfect still. And so the other thing I've seen, I think where you get some really big buckets is they over design. And we're like use HVAC for an example. We'll go through and we'll do a bottoms up first principles analysis. We'll go, we need 30 tons and we think that'll be okay. We may get into operations and be like, it's not quite right. We'll add another 5 and we just add it. Consulting comes in and goes, well, 30 is probably okay, but just in case we're going to give you 50 because there's that one day in the summer when it's 110 and we want to make sure you can still hit your temperature. We don't give a shit. Like that one day we're like, fine, we're a little hot in the room. And so instead of spending, $10 million in HVAC, we'll spend 4. And that's that's where I see the big differences in our cost. And then we don't overcomplicate it. Like people have been growing weed in basements for a long time. We don't need something fancy. Like, we have nice facilities, but also, like come into my office, like there's no door. And most people will be like, oh my God, like, and, a lot of this was early on, like, like the big joke I had is I was talking to an investor in Canada early on. I think Paul Rosen, he runs TGIF now, but he was a big early investor. And I was pitching him, trying to get money to go public. And he had just gone and visited MedMin, their new Nevada facility. And he was talking about this booty machine where you stick your foot in a machine and it puts a booty on it. And he was talking about how awesome it was. And I was like, Paul, but it probably cost $75,000 of your money. And he looks at me, and you can see he's like, shoot. And he laughs and he's like, I don't care, it was worth it. And that was the mentality, right? Like just all these fancy things that you don't need. And so we don't overcomplicate it, I guess is the short of it. A great example here, like, Acreage is going through some challenges right now. But we bought one of their facilities in Oregon. They paid, I don't know how much money for this control system from a local company who had never done one. The first thing we did when we got in here is we disconnected it. It doesn't work, right? It's stuff like that. And it probably wasn't a big number, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, but that's the money we don't waste. And so we don't overcomplicate it. That's the easiest way to understand. It's weed, guys. I mean, come on. We've been growing it forever. Like it's weed. Basements, like lights, like it's not that complicated.
Right?
Exactly. It's weed.
How do you choose new states to expand to, Obie? Is it like, hey, this state has a certain population. I like this city. Like talk us through those kind of decisions, right? Because you're very peculiar now.
Yeah, we're a little opportunistic when it comes to that. We've talked a little bit internally about should we get more process driven towards that. And I'm like, maybe, but like the industry is too fluid to be like, hey, we want to be in this market. Let's go find it. It's just, there's some opportunistic to what we do and we have good relationships. And so like Jersey came into we got introduced to them through a good friend of mine who used to work in Oregon. We got introduced to the group in Illinois through one of our investors. We have a kind of a criteria. And so opportunistic around assets, we're going to get a little bit more kind of structured around this because we want to start kind of turning these things on more, kind of methodically. We want markets that are either early adult use or transitioning. Like I wouldn't want to go into, Minnesota 5 years ago and fight kind of the medical challenges that market faces. So we think the inflection point from medical to adult use is a great time to enter. And then we want to look at markets, obviously, like everyone, where there's a little bit more of a limited license component. And so, Jersey and Illinois, we love. Going forward, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Missouri, still kind of interesting. There's a bunch of new markets turning on that we'll watch that are early, and they're a little too early for us because we're really kind of a recreational adult use company. We get tons of inbound from like Massachusetts, and we're like, yeah, like it's kind of past that curve. And could we go there and be successful? Sure. But there's only so many things we can kind of execute upon. And so just being very thoughtful around bandwidth and, we're patient. Like if, we say we want a market or two a year, but if we don't get one, it's okay. We're not going to just go after something just because we're like, oh, we have to get another market. Right. And so we're also very patient. Like if there's nothing good, we'll sit on it. But, as people are finding, cultivation is very hard. Grown Rogue has access to cash and there's no cash in the market. If we wanted more cash, we could go get it. Our balance sheet is super strong just with our internal cash. And so we become a very kind of preferred partner. And we're also a good partner. I mean, that's an important part of this. Like we do what we say, we're transparent, we communicate well. We've proven that in Michigan. We're proving it in Jersey. We're proving it in Illinois. And so, the relationship and the reputation you build, like, versus companies that come in and kind of cram you a little bit and stick it to you, like, people want to work with us, which I think is, that's an important part of these partnerships.
Take us through the complicated balance of building in new states, but then having the right flower genetics to bring to those states from maybe from a consumer standpoint, with everything always changing and people's interests and educational level always varying. Take us through that complicated balance, because a consumer in Oregon likely doesn't have the same preferences as a consumer in New Jersey.
Yeah, we definitely see that. And so we run a very decentralized organization as best as we can. And so we put a lot of the decision making down into the state levels with the leadership there that understands the market. But you'd be surprised, like there's a lot of crossover, but then there's nuances within each market. And so we look at genetics a lot like fashion and a flower company. Like, people don't want Starbucks coffee the same every day in every state. Like, they do want to see variety, but there's a fair amount of crossover. I mean, and it's not complicated, right? They want usually color, right? Like, that's getting very popular, like purple, like in Oregon, if it's not purple, it's hard to sell. And so, like, that's they want it to smell good. They want decent to high potency. And so a lot of the characteristics are very similar, but then what you find is in your leadership, you have, your sales and operation kind of cultivation team who prioritize certain genetics. And then you'll have, like, for instance, we have a very disciplined and regimented genetic planning portion of our business. Like, every 2 weeks, our team meets and goes through what's in the lineup, what's selling, what's not, what's growing well, what's not. Our whole kind of three-headed monster gets together and makes adjustments or changes. We have found that diversity is super critical. We like to keep nothing above 10%, like 6 or 7% of our total production. So if we do 1,000 pounds a month, we don't want more than 60, maybe 100 max of one strain. Michigan,
even if one is like just running away as a leader, you
can surge it a little bit, but people get tired of it. They get tired of seeing the same thing every day. They want what's new. They want the new tennis shoe. They want the new t-shirt. They want that new style. That's just, it's been like time eternal. That's
the scarcity aspect of it, right? Like the allure of the scarcity, and then the new, this is the new thing from grown. I got to try it.
The new thing. And so we cycle through genetics very fast. A good genetic might last a year, but then you'll get an outlier. And I was going to get to this Blue Runs in Michigan, which we can grow 20% of that thing. We can't keep in stock. And that's funny. I pushed back on it for a year. I finally put my national post-harvest director into that meeting because, like, hey, I just want to keep my eyes on this. I was like, great. It was funny on the last call when he first started kind of getting engaged. He's like, hey, are we growing too much of this? And I was like, Sean, you're like late to the party. I've been saying this for a year. Like, they cannot grow enough of this Blue Runs. It's like, and then in Oregon, it's like, okay, people like it. But like, I think we're taking it out of the lineup. It just doesn't have that. It's something about it. And so, like, every now and again, you get an outlier, but generally 6 to 7%, kick-ass strain you might get 18 months out of. It's usually between 6 months to a year. That's it. And then you got the next thing. And so, we do some internal breeding, so we get some proprietary stuff. It's one of our kind of missions for, end of this year, 25, is to get our breeding program a little bit more robust so we can have more kind of proprietary genetics. And then going back to the culture and the legacy, like our national director of cultivation is super tied into what the breeders are doing. And so we kind of get first access to a lot of stuff that's coming out that's hot, that has the right characteristics for us, has some hype. And you got to be on point in genetics, because if you go stale on that, they'll go to a different producer very, very quickly.
It's got to be extremely complicated balance, just given all the factors from a timing standpoint, from a state standpoint. It's got to be extremely, extremely complicated.
Yep. It's good planning. And again, I can't stress enough the maintaining the disciplines that we set up, that have gotten us to this point. And as things get better and they feel more sustainable, ensuring we don't lose that. Like, it's, like when you get in great shape, you work really hard, you got to maintain that. You have to maintain the disciplines of going to the gym every single day. It's really easy to lose it. Hard to get it, easy to lose it. And so we just, and that goes to our background. Like, my wife, Sarah, was a D1 athlete. Like she's one of the most disciplined people I've ever met. I'm not quite as disciplined as her, but there's still a lot of just similarities there. And it's, that percolates down in terms, and we talk about it all the time. Like we just had a meeting yesterday around, like we've done some reorg, like I promoted, like a new GM in Oregon because I was the de facto GM, but my bandwidth is getting, very limited now. And I was like, we need a new org chart. Granted, do we generally know what the org is? Of course, but I want it on paper. I want everyone to know what it is. Like we've got a few new roles, make sure there's job descriptions. It's that kind of little stuff that it's the little things that we do every day that I think is what creates this holistic kind of business that we have that, people from the outside go, oh, it looks awesome. But there's so much work that goes inside of it to make it look like that.
Who is a grown rogue customer, right? Like for someone listening to this right now that maybe never tried the brand, maybe an East Coaster looking for the New Jersey opportunity, like, who is this person and what is some of the elements about them that you think would make them interested in your products?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely a flower company, right? So it's a flower consumer. Our target is a younger, right? Like we are definitely, I think you age out of cannabis a little bit. Like a lot of people talk about, cradle to grave, but like when I was a young guy in college, like I could smoke an eighth a day, no problem. Fully functional, play basketball, great grades. Like, and so, but now, like, I mean, if I smoke a joint, it's like, I've got to take a couple hours. And so I think it's a younger kind of hip, that cares about just that flower quality and also price, right? They're price conscious, but I don't think we're attracting too many 60-year-olds to our product. It's more, and granted it's a 21 and over, but there's plenty of younger, but it's probably like 18 to like 30 is probably kind of the core, I think, where the majority of our consumption happens. It's the heavy consumers, right? Like we're also not targeting, like another good example, like things we learned, right? Like, so early on, everyone wanted to target the soccer mom. Like that was the goal, disposable income, like, just the new audience. And I think beverages, this was like a whole nother conversation, but beverages might be the product that actually finally gets to that consumer. But my sister-in-law was like a heavy executive in IT, tons of disposable income, smokes weed. I was like, perfect. Went up to visit her in Portland, went to one of the fancy shops up there. I'm looking at all the product being like, God, this stuff looks like garbage. We walked out and I'm like, it was off. She's like, did you see that light fixture? That was a $600. And I was like, oh my God, Heather, you are my consumer. He's like, I like vape carts. I'm like, awesome. How many do you smoke a week? She's like, whoa, I might smoke 1 or 2 a year. And that was like,
Bing.
ding. Like, you're not a customer. Like, I might make $12 on you for a whole year. It's not even worth it. And it's just, we all wanted that customer, but our customers are heavy consumers, functional. Like we're not looking for like stoners that lay on the couch all day, but I think that's the kind of customer we're looking for. It's a lifestyle. It's an experience. Like one of our taglines is the right experience, or enhanced experiences. Like, we used to, when we consumed, we would consume and go to the river. We'd go to hang out with our buddies for dinner. We'd go on mountain bike rides. Like we go to the redwoods. Like it was an experience-based enhancer. And that's really where we want to see our consumers. And, it's not so much a lifestyle, but it's part of your lifestyle, but still maintaining functionality. Like we don't want the typical stereotype of the stoner that lays around, baked on the couch all day. That's not who we're trying. I'm sure some of those people smoke our weed, but that's not really, we don't get excited about that side of it.
How do you balance your time, Obie, between the new states that are coming online and kind of maintaining the operations in Oregon?
No boundaries, I guess.
Do you just go where the biggest fire is, or?
It's a lot of firefighting. I'll tell you what, as we've scaled and we've gotten more competent in the different areas of our business, it's actually given me a lot of confidence in our team and their ability to kind of take, projects on. Like, we've been doing a fair amount of kind of reorganization in the business the last year. Like we kind of retrofitted our accounting team. We've got a new controller. We've got a VP of business analytics, a role we actually built for a candidate we were talking to around a different role. We just liked him so much. It's like, we have to get you on this team. We've done internal promotions. And so I would actually say I feel slightly less busy today, which is funny considering our growth, than I did a year and a half, 2 years ago when I was so far down in the business, just making it functional work. Probably some of that was more stress around cash and just, is this going to, work? But, my core focus is ensuring our current states stay on the path, and they can, and, like Q1 was fantastic. I mean, we reported 37% EBITDA margin. I think it's the best EBITDA margin in Q1 for any public cannabis company. And that's in competitive markets. And that's traditionally like January and February are slow months. And so that's record revenue, fantastic. And so ensuring our core markets maintain their efficiency. And I've got a great team in both those markets. And then a lot of time is on Jersey right now. It's one of the things on my board. I got 5 things on my board around what our goals for 24 are. Jersey execution, cost control, yield, sell-through, culture. So ensuring those things kind of continue. And then, expansion. And then, I'm becoming more of a true CEO where there's a little more strategy in some of the deal structure we're doing, some of the negotiations that are happening across various kind of aspects of the business. It's kind of all over. A little bit more capital markets, like, I'm talking to more bankers and things like that. I try and do that as little as possible. I was on with the Hedge Eye yesterday, doing you guys today. So telling our story a little bit more, I guess, trying to get people to understand who we are as we get a little bit more secure and kind of fixed in who we're going to be. But I think about that all the time where I'm like, we can't get too carried away. We have to maintain kind of the operational focus. Spend a lot of time on cash. Like, we're a cash company. Like, I still review almost all of the AP every 2 weeks. Right. I mean, there's like the day-to-day stuff like grow, supplies that just gets purchased, but like, little things like that I keep a really kind of close eye on, but really trusting the team a lot lately. And they're crushing it. I mean, you can see it. They're crushing it. And I couldn't be more proud of and humbled, right, to go to battle with them every single day. It's pretty amazing.
What is the most popular or most recognizable brand for Grown Rogue nationally? Brand or strain, sorry.
Oh, you think what's most popular for us?
Yeah, which one of your brands or strains is the most popular nationally?
Oh, I'd say the Blue Runts in Michigan is probably, just because it's it's 20% of that. I mean, maybe it's not quite that high, but it's probably 20% of the business out there. And so that's one we definitely got a reputation on.
Which strain do you think is the most underrated?
I very rarely get a question I just don't have a good answer to. That's one of them. I don't, and strains that are underrated happen, right? And mostly it's because the smoke is really good. Like, that's the other thing we do when we go through a genetic. Like, everyone looks at the way it looks, the way it smells, bag appeal, potency. Like, we smoke it. And if it doesn't smoke good, sometimes we'll still keep in the lineup. But what happens a fair amount is something smokes really good, but doesn't have those characteristics, so no one wants to buy it. Those are probably the underrated strains. Unfortunately, we don't really grow those because the consumer is still who we work for. And if they're not going to buy it, it doesn't matter. That's a hard one to kind of answer. So, not very many, because most of the strains we grow, people like. As it relates to brands, we're kind of a single brand. Like, Grown Rogue is the brand. We recently launched, which we're really excited about, a brand called Yeti, which you guys can look up. And, it's got really good caricature. So the packaging's really tight. And it's a really balancing quality and cost for pre-roll. And so that's actually far exceeded our expectations. I think we launched it in December in both markets, and we're already selling like a couple 100 pounds a month of these pre-rolls between both markets. And so that product has some, ability, I think, to scale a little bit more faster than Grown Rogue, because Grown Rogue is a flower brand. Like, you can't just hand that to someone and say, can you license this? Because the product quality has to be so good. The Yeti as a pre-roll, I think, has a little bit more ability to go into like a new market and say, hey, can we take some of your, smalls and whatnot, turn them into pre-rolls? And you don't have to be quite so tight on the quality perspective, because it's got to be good, but really it's a price game for us. So we're happy about that brand, but we don't want a bunch of brands. We're building the Grown Rogue brand. That's what our focus is. And, we think there's plenty of markets and plenty of opportunity to continue to push that, rather than starting to create all these new brands and, again, get diluted. You get diluted when you do that. And we want to stay, kind of focused who we are.
Dream smoking session, 3 people dead or alive.
I've never been asked that question. That's another good one. Luka Doncic. because I love what they're doing right now, and that guy'd be fun to smoke a joint with, I bet. That's number one. I got to put my wife in there because if I smoke, I got to have her with me. So she's amazing. I'd love to smoke a joint with Elon Musk. So that's my three: Luca, Elon, and Sarah.
That's a trio. What question do you wish more people asked?
I want your answer to that question too. What's your three?
So that's a fair one. I've never been asked that back. That's tough because I never thought about it.
Me neither. So that's why I'm putting you back on the spot.
Fair. Elon would be fun. But I think I would go more like Derek Jeter.
That's a good one.
Mark Cuban, and I've thought about this a million times and I've never narrowed down my three. I got those two, but I never had my third. Maybe Kobe Bryant.
Well, you said he had to be alive. Kobe would be an amazing one.
Fair.
But good. Okay, good answers. All right. What was you were going to ask a question about something no one asked me or something like that?
What question do you wish more people asked you?
It's funny. In my interviews, one of the things I do with salespeople is ask them what color car they have. And the purpose of that really is to gauge how well they're listening. As a salesperson, you need to listen a lot. And it's surprising how many times people say, oh, I drive a Ford. And they don't really listen to the color. And so it kind of reminds me of that question. You know what I don't think people ask enough about is culture and about how critical that is to a successful organization. People want to talk about the operational efficiencies, your stock, your financial performance, your strains. People don't ask enough about the engine that drives this business, which is our people. I wish there was more emphasis in this industry and to really appreciate great leadership, operational management teams. And there should be more emphasis on there because a lot of companies have gotten in trouble because they've outgrown their talent. They've had plenty of cash, no talent. And so more questions on the team, I think, would be a good thing for people to focus on.
Perfectly said. All right, Obie, prediction time. What is your vision for craft cannabis in 10 years, and what new advantages will consumers experience?
You ask good questions. I like this. I think you will see a small component of nationally recognized craft cannabis companies, probably 10 or less is my suspicion, that will have true national kind of recognition around brand quality, consumer loyalty, things like that. And I think 10 years is probably realistic. Like, we're still very, very early. As far as consumer preferences, I think beverages are going to be huge. And so I don't think that's a direct competition to like Grown Rogue model because they're two totally different experiences in terms of the markets. But I think you're seeing the slow kind of socialization and acceptance of marijuana, THC, whatever you want to call it, in the mainstream. I think it needs to be regulated better. I don't like the way it's kind of in the hemp rules where there's not a lot of, age restriction and testing. Like, I think there needs to be better regulation. I don't think the intention of the farm bill was to kind of allow THC products. And everyone says not a loophole, but it was not the intention. But I mean, think about alcohol versus THC and think about going to a bar. Like, Minnesota's fantastic. You go there and you get a THC beverage. Like going to a basketball game. We just both talked about sporting events. I see that being a big part of the evolution of recreational consumption away from alcohol in the U.S. and the world probably over the next 10 years, which I think is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think consumers are going to expect high quality products at fair prices that are consistently delivered. And I think what your team is doing consistently is on the right track. And I expect as the shakeout continues that more consumers will have the expectations around products like yours. And I'm looking forward to watching your team continue to grow. So Obie, for our listeners, they want to get in touch and they want to learn more, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, so products are in the markets we operate in, Oregon, Michigan. You can probably get a little bit of, stuff that we're responsible for in Maryland and Minnesota right now. Jersey's coming soon. If you want to learn more about the company, like, go to our website. I forget I think it's invest@grownrogue.com. Like, send us an email. Jake Hyatt, who I know, Brian, like, does a ton of work for us and runs our IR, and he's fantastic to talk to. But yeah, we're happy to talk to folks, reach out. That's probably the best way to kind of track us down.
I'll link it up in the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.